I saw them when you and Mom were trying to fold the map.
Audrey, when they close the road, they put up big signs, like this one.
There's a saying in Hollywood, the harder a comedy makes America laugh, the more unbelievable the tragedies behind it. And if there's one film that proves it, it's National Lampoon's Vacation. The man most remembered from the film went through heart failure and now lives with fading memory. A woman audiences once adored carries regret over sacrificing her career and went through a painful broken marriage. And another drifted so far that he once sought asylum in Canada, running from warrants in California. This is a story about the lives behind a classic comedy you thought you already knew. And trust me, this journey is filled with strange facts, even darker than their own fates. So watch now and stay until the end. Number 1, Chevy Chase is Clark Griswold. Clark, in 1983, Chevy Chase was 40
Besides,
years
I got a
old,
great deal on
right
this one.
in that sweet spot where a comedy star could just step on screen and American audiences would cheer. Then National Lampoon's Vacation came along, and Clark Griswold became the role of his life. The movie was a huge hit, and Clark followed him through multiple sequels to the point where for a lot of people mentioning Chevy Chase means thinking of the guy driving the truckster trying way too hard to be the perfect dad and then blowing the whole trip up in a way only 80s America could come up with. This year he is 83, but the name Clark Griswold is still tied to him. But Chevy Chase's story was never just about laughs. What made his life heavier than people realize started very early. Chase revealed he was abused by his mother and stepfather as a child. That never shows up on screen, but it explains a lot about the man behind the fame-talented, very talented, but always carrying what feels like an old crack inside that never really healed. Then the rest of his life went down a path Hollywood has seen too many times. Cocaine, alcohol, interventions, slips that slowly chipped away at his image. As time went on, Chevy Chase's name wasn't just tied to success anymore, but also to being difficult to work with, easy to clash with, and gradually losing the one thing a star needs most: likability. That's the bitter part. Some people lose their shine fast. He lost it slower, but everyone could see it fading. And then came the most serious blow. In 2021, he went into heart failure, spent weeks in the hospital, was in a coma for 8 days. And he himself said what remained afterward were gaps in his memory. Today, Chevy Chase still appears in public, still gets called by the name Griswold, but his story now isn't just about glory anymore. It's about the cost of time. And that's where we move to Beverly D'Angelo, the woman who stood beside Clark Griswold. Number 2, Beverly D'Angelo as Ellen Griswold. In the Griswold family, Clark is the one who blows everything up. Ellen is the one who keeps that chaos looking like a family. That's why Beverly D'Angelo stayed in people's memories for so long. When National Lampoon's Vacation came out in 1983, she was 32, already established after coal miner's daughter, not some unknown face chasing luck. What's interesting is that at first she didn't even see herself as the suburban mom with 2 grown kids type. And yet, Ellen Griswold became the role people remember her for the most. To me, that's such a classic Hollywood irony. The role you don't think is yours ends up following you your whole life. But if you look closer, Beverly D'Angelo's life wasn't as calm as Ellen's on screen. In 2001, she had twins with Al Pacino at 49. At an age when many stars cling tightly to their careers, she changed direction completely for her children. And she said it very plainly, if she had put her career first, she might have gone even further. But she chose to be a mother. Some turns in life look smooth from the outside, but they completely reshape who you become. Then the harder part came. Her relationship with Pacino fell apart, and by 2003, things ended up in court over custody and visitation. For someone who doesn't live off scandal, that was a phase exhausting enough, painful enough, and public enough to wear anyone down. What I respect is that she didn't stay stuck there. Years later, she spoke about Pacino more calmly, like they had moved past the worst and kept what mattered most, their children. This year, Beverly D'Angelo is 75. She's still there, still remembered, still carrying herself like a woman who's been through a lot without turning her pain into a performance. And that's where we move to Anthony Michael Hall, the son who grew up right in front of American audiences. Number 3, Anthony Michael Hall as Rusty Griswold. Anthony Michael Hall took this role at a very young age. He was born in 1968. The movie came out in 1983, which means when audiences met Rusty Griswold, he was just 15. But what matters more is that this role didn't stand alone. It opened the door straight into the period where Anthony Michael Hall exploded into one of the defining teen faces of 80s Hollywood. The price for that came early. Hall said it took him nearly 20 years to really process what it meant to become famous so young. When the whole country knows your face while you're still a kid, you don't just grow up in front of cameras. You have to learn how to live with the audience's memory of you. And Anthony Michael Hall went through exactly that. There was a time in his 20s when he slowed down a lot. His career no longer took off the way it had at the start, along with issues with alcohol and a stretch where he had to pull himself back on track. His life wasn't as clean as Rusty's image either. In 2017, Hall entered a no-contest plea in a case involving a fight with a neighbor that left the other person with a broken wrist. It wasn't something that made him disappear, but it was enough of a mark to remind people that child stars don't grow up completely intact. What matters is that he kept going. Anthony Michael Hall found his rhythm again, kept acting, and at 55 became a father for the first time when his son was born in 2023. This year, he is 58. To me, that's the best part of this story. Rusty didn't stay trapped in America's memory. He grew older, stumbled, and lived long enough to become someone else. Number 4, Dana Barron as Audrey Griswold. If Anthony Michael Hall is the son people remember right away, Dana Barron is the original daughter of the Griswold family that early audiences can't confuse with anyone else. Dana is the original Audrey Griswold. When National Lampoon's Vacation came out in 1983, she was 17. And this year, Dana Barron is 60. What's interesting about Dana is that she didn't come into the film as a beginner. She grew up in a family deeply rooted in the arts. Her father even co-founded the Weiss Barron School in New York. So by the time she got to Vacation, she already had a foundation. Dana said there were about 300 kids who auditioned before she and Anthony Michael Hall were paired together, and the natural sibling bickering between them helped them land the roles. It's a small detail, but it says a lot about the spirit of the movie. Rusty and Audrey weren't written as clean sitcom kids. They felt more like real siblings, and Dana played a big part in that. Later on, when the Vacation sequels kept going, but Audrey kept being recast, Dana became the Audrey that original fans remembered the most. Dana Barron's life didn't follow the path many young stars did. No huge explosion followed by scandal, no tabloids chasing her for years. After Vacation, she kept working, appeared on television, had One Life to Live, Beverly Hills, 90210, and even won a Daytime Emmy in 1989 for No Means No. Not the path of a superstar, but also not the path of someone forgotten by Hollywood. Now let's be real. If you think going through the 4 Griswold family members means you've seen all the chaos, not quite. What's on screen is messy enough, but behind the scenes gets even stranger. For example, the ending audiences have remembered for decades wasn't the original ending. At first, Clark didn't lead the family into Wally World. He drove straight to Roy Wally's house and forced the park owner and his guests by the pool to compensate him for the nightmare trip. Just hearing that you can tell this family was never normal even on paper. And there's more. The familiar Wally World sequence, the one everyone remembers, was actually filmed months later as an added scene. That's why, if you look closely, Rusty and Audrey look slightly different at the end compared to the beginning. Hollywood really does survive on last-minute fixes like that sometimes. And maybe the funniest behind-the-scenes story is that Anthony Michael Hall admitted he once snuck onto the set to peek at Beverly D'Angelo during a shower scene, only to get caught on the spot. That's pure teenage energy on an 80s film set. Anyway, let's step away from the Griswolds for a second, because the next pair pushes this trip even further off the rails. Imogene Coca as Aunt Edna and Randy Quaid as Cousin Eddie. Number 5, Imogene Coca as Aunt Edna. Aunt Edna only appears briefly in Vacation, but It's enough to push the whole trip into a completely different kind of chaos. And what makes the role even more interesting is that the actress wasn't some faded, elderly performer. Imogene Coca was a legend of American television comedy from the days of Your Show of Shows. When National Lampoon's Vacation came out in 1983, she was already 75. She passed away in 2001 at the age of 92. In other words, when she stepped into Aunt Edna, she belonged to an older Hollywood era. What's both touching and sad is that in real life, Imogene Coca wasn't comfortable playing such an unpleasant character. Donna Barron said that after almost every scene, she would ask if she had gone too mean, and her real life was far heavier than her cranky on-screen persona. In 1955, her husband passed away. Just weeks later, her mother died. Then in 1973, after a car accident in heavy fog, she lost sight in her right eye and had to wear a cosmetic lens for the rest of her life. But she kept going. She kept working, kept performing, and lived her final years with Alzheimer's before passing at 92. To me, that's what stands out most. Aunt Edna makes you laugh. Imogene Coca makes you feel both respect and sympathy. Number 6, Randy Quaid as Cousin Eddie. When National Lampoon's Vacation came out in 1983, Randy Quaid was 33. This year he is 76. And what many people forget is that before Cousin Eddie, he was a strong actor nominated for an Oscar for The Last Detail and later winning a Golden Globe for LBJ the early years. That's why what happened later in his life surprised so many people. Starting in the late 2000s, Randy Quaid's life took a chaotic turn. Legal troubles kept piling up. Then he and his wife moved to Canada, applied for asylum, and claimed there was a conspiracy targeting Hollywood stars, including them. At that point, it no longer felt like a celebrity stumbling. It felt like a life completely drifting off its original path, and anyone watching from the outside could see it becoming harder to believe. In 2015, the two were even arrested at the border while trying to return to the United States because of warrants from California. But there's something strange about Randy Quaid. After everything, audiences still call him Cousin Eddie first. In 2025, he even appeared in a reunion with Chevy Chase, Beverly D'Angelo, Dana Barron, and Anthony Michael Hall. To me, that says more about the power of that role than any award ever could. At this point, you can see it clearly. Just Aunt Edna and Cousin Eddie alone already pushed the Griswold trip from exhausting into full-blown chaos. But what makes Vacation great is the deeper you dig, the more you realize the movie isn't just wild on screen. It takes very American anxieties and pushes them into something almost absurdly funny, like Aunt Edna's story. Her death in the film feels extreme, but it's actually close to a kind of road trip folklore Americans have told for years about family trips so bad all you can do is laugh. And if you think the movie is already dark enough, not quite. In John Hughes' original short story, the dog Dinky's fate is even harsher. The original version is more bitter, colder, and honestly, if they had filmed it that way, the movie would have been a lot less fun. Sometimes Hollywood knowing where to stop is a good thing. As for Cousin Eddie, here's something funny: the character almost didn't last the way we remember. Randy Quaid said Eddie was written out of European Vacation, meaning the weirdest relative in the family nearly disappeared from the franchise altogether. And speaking of faces that didn't appear much but stayed in the minds of American men for years, let's move to Christie Brinkley and John Candy. Number 7, Christie Brinkley as the girl in the Ferrari. Some faces in Vacation only show up for a few minutes, but American men remember them for decades. Christie Brinkley is exactly that. When the film came out in 1983, she was 29, right at the peak of being an American beauty icon after 3 consecutive Sports Illustrated swimsuit covers and years as the face of CoverGirl. The role of the girl in the Ferrari was her film debut, but honestly, Vacation didn't create Christie Brinkley. Christie Brinkley made a very small role into an image people still recognize more than 40 years later. This year, she is 72. But her real life wasn't nearly as glamorous as her on-screen presence. In her recent memoir, she revealed she was beaten with a belt by her biological father as a child, living in fear through a part of her childhood no one could see. Then, in 1994, she nearly died in a helicopter crash in Colorado. Things like that could break someone completely, especially someone the public sees as a never-fading California dream. Then her life took another painful turn. Her marriage to Peter Cook ended after his affair with a teenage girl, leading to a long divorce and custody battle. But she kept going, kept showing up, kept writing, and held on to that light Americans have recognized in her for decades. Number 8, John Candy as Lasky. In National Lampoon's Vacation, the role of Lasky isn't long, but the moment he shows up at Wally World, people remember him right away. When the film came out in 1983, John Candy was 33. He was born in 1950 and passed away in 1994 at just 43. What matters is that this wasn't some random supporting actor passing through for fun. Before and after Vacation, Candy was already one of the most beloved comedy faces in North America, coming up from Second City and SCTV and becoming a major name on the big screen. What makes John Candy's story sadder than people think is that behind that warm presence was actually a pretty heavy inner life. His father died of heart disease on his 5th birthday, and that shadow stayed with him for a long time. Later on, people close to him in the documentary John Candy, I Like Me, said he lived with chronic anxiety, had long panic attacks at airports or on set, and even went to therapy trying to understand what was happening to him. At the same time, there was the pressure about his weight, something that followed him for years under Hollywood lights. Then came the ending that still feels too early. In March 1994, while filming Wagons East in Durango, Mexico, John Candy died of a heart attack in his sleep. He was only 43. To me, this is always one of the most heartbreaking losses in American comedy of the 80s and early 90s. After going through Christie Brinkley and John Candy, you really see how Vacation knew exactly how to use its cast. One person just had to pass by in a red Ferrari for American men to remember her for decades. Another only needed a few minutes at Wally World to light up the entire ending. But what's even better is that both of them left behind some behind-the-scenes details that are more interesting than you'd expect. For example, Christie Brinkley. For years, fans have speculated that in the original ending, the girl in the Ferrari was actually Roy Wally's daughter, and that she was the one who saved the Griswold family. Sounds reasonable. Problem is, it's not true. Anthony Michael Hall and Dana Barron both shut that down pretty clearly. And speaking of Christy, there's another detail that male audiences back then probably never forgot: that famous pool scene wasn't actually fully nude. Dana Barron said Christy wore a fake nude outfit while Beverly D'Angelo was the one who did the real scene. As for John Candy, he basically came into the film as a last-minute save. The original ending was scrapped, the Wally World sequence was rewritten, and thanks to that change, Candy ended up in the role of Lasky. Long story short, without that last-minute fix, audiences might have lost one of the funniest scenes in the movie. And now, from two unforgettable cameos, we move to the final pair, Eugene Levy and James Keach, two faces with brief appearances but strong impact. Number 9, Eugene Levy as Ed the car salesman. Eugene Levy only appears at the beginning of Vacation in a very short role. But to be fair, he's the one who sends the Griswold family straight into disaster. Without that slick salesman, Clark wouldn't have driven home the Wagon Queen family truckster, and the whole trip might have been a lot less of a mess. When the film came out in 1983, he was 37. This year, Eugene Levy is 79. And what's worth noting is that this small role was just an early dot in a long and steady comedy career from SCTV to Schitt's Creek. What's most interesting about Eugene Levy is that his life didn't explode the way many others on this list did. No major scandals, no long public downfall. Instead, he's one of the few in Hollywood who aged in a very grounded way. He married Deborah Devine in 1977, has 2 children, Dan and Sarah Levy, and the couple chose to raise their kids in Toronto so they could grow up in a more normal environment. The older you get, the more you realize that's not a small decision. It's how someone keeps their family steady in a profession that can easily throw everything off balance. Then came the best part. later on. In 2024, Eugene and Dan Levy became the first father and son duo to host the Emmy Awards. That same year, he received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. By 2025, he was still continuing The Reluctant Traveler. Number 10, James Keach is the motorcycle cop. You remember this last name, right? James Keach only appears briefly in Vacation, but he's tied to a moment that anyone who remembers the film can't forget. That motorcycle cop is the one who stops Clark and pushes the movie into a much darker tone. James Keach was born in 1947. When the film came out in 1983, he was 36. This year he is 78. What matters is that in real life, James Keach wasn't just an actor passing through small roles. He's also a director and producer, and later moved into documentaries with real skill. The most public part of his personal life was his marriage to Jane Seymour. They got married in 1993, had twin sons, then separated in 2013 and finalized their divorce in 2015. It was a long marriage, and when it ended, audiences didn't just remember him as a familiar face from older American films, but as someone who had gone through a very real turning point in life. But James Keach didn't stop there. In 2021, he won a Grammy for Linda Ronstadt, The Sound of My Voice. To me, that's a beautiful second act for someone who started with small roles and lived long enough to build something meaningful later in his career. You can see it clearly. Vacation didn't just have a strong main cast. Even the quick appearances were handled by people with real skill. And that's where these final facts are worth mentioning. First, this film was really a meeting point of two major comedy systems of that time. TCM pointed out that the supporting cast brought together many faces from Saturday Night Live and SCTV. In short, it looks like a simple family road trip movie, but it actually packs in a seriously strong comedy lineup. Second, that Famous Family Truckster wasn't just one car. OFI noted that the production used 5 different trucksters for filming. Makes sense. With the way Clark Griswold puts that car through hell, one probably wouldn't have survived the whole trip. And knowing this, you realize the car wasn't just a prop. It was basically another character in the film. And finally, if you thought Vacation was already dark, the original version by John Hughes was even darker. Entertainment Weekly pointed out that the detail about the dog Dinky in the original short story was much harsher than in the film. This time, Hollywood actually knew where to stop. The more I look back at National Lampoon's Vacation, the more I feel like it's not just a comedy about a disastrous family trip. Behind the laughter are people who went through a lot in real life. Some carried a scarred childhood, some paid with their health, some went through breakups, losses, or years when Hollywood lights weren't as warm as before. And maybe that's exactly why I appreciate them more. Because once you know what they went through off screen, you don't just remember them as faces anymore. You remember them as real people who brought both their joy and their pain into a film that kept us laughing for so many years. Now it's your turn. Who do you remember the most from this cast, and which moment from Vacation has stayed with you until today? Tell me in the comments. And if you want us to continue this journey with another classic film, leave your suggestion for the next episode. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.